as we said, let's start with the Michigan defense, fellas, and they're a little bit banged up in the secondary, as CB you alluded to. Rod Moore, Makari Page, both hurt. Amorion Walker sounds like he'll be out as well. Will Johnson potentially out for Michigan. So, it's potentially, 3 out of your 5 starters back there. And Amorion Walker, seems like he was going to work into the rotation anyway. That has some people on the message board, some people on Twitter, a little bit uneasy going in. You're still a 36-point favorite, though. And you're, quite frankly, playing in East Carolina offense that has a ton of question marks. After 4 years of Holton Allers as their quarterback, they're moving on to probably Mason Garcia, big 6'5", 249 pound quarterback who can move back there. But they could play multiple quarterbacks. Their OC said that this week as well. But yeah, your guys' thoughts on what to expect out of this Michigan defense?
Yeah, out of the Michigan defense, I mean, it's going to be, again, I don't know that this East Carolina offense is going to be able to wing it, so to speak, like they have the last few years. Obviously, some new blood at quarterback, some new guys at the skill positions, but if they do, they're going to do a lot of the short stuff. That's kind of what their MO has been over the years. And when you do that, not only do you have to kind of be sound, I mean, you don't have to hold up in coverage as long, but when you have a bunch of new guys that are breaking in the secondary, you're going to have to be, keep guys in front of you, and you're going to have to be sure tacklers. And when you're talking about having, sophomores and potentially some freshmen out there getting playing time, that is a concern, and that's something to keep an eye on. So I actually, when you look at this East Carolina team, I think they have some good size up front on the offensive line. 2 solid backs. One of them's coming off of a torn ACL, so question marks about his workload. But, I do wonder, if it is Mason Garcia at quarterback, like you said, big, tall guy with a big arm, maybe they do kind of try and chuck it down the field and test those Michigan corners, because I think that's probably, when you look at who's going to be on the field in this game on Saturday, that's probably a place where East Carolina might think that they have a chance to keep this thing the most competitive. So again, how do you offset, questions in the back 7? You get to the quarterback, you get pressure with 4. That's where we're going to see Chris Jenkins, who will be on the field, what his enhanced pass rush looks like. Mason Graham has worked on, his bull rush and some of the finesse stuff. We know how deep they are at edge. So for me, again, as cliche as it is, when you come into a game like this, and the way it does look like that most of Michigan's injury issues or question marks, whatever you want to call them, are at wide receiver, at cornerback, it's going to be in the trenches where, and that's, shout out Chris Ballas, Doug Skeen in the trenches coming back on Sunday. In the trenches is where I think Michigan has a chance to impose its will, especially on that defensive side of the ball. So get pressure and make East Carolina uncomfortable, I think is one of the bigger keys to this game.
Yeah, I agree with that. And sorry about the mute, fellas. I'm trying to write here. You know what? You think when you're overmatched, one of the ways that Michigan State has approached it in past years is with that, what we call the arm punt offense, right? You just have your quarterback go back there, maybe all week you're in practice, you're just throwing it up and hoping your fast guy goes and gets it. And it's actually worked a few times, win some of those 50-50 battles. I don't know that they have the receivers to do it. It only takes one sometimes if you don't adjust, as we saw in 2020. But you know what? I think that might be something that they try. And when you've got guys, the good news is here, guys, Josh Wallace has played a lot of football. I think you're going to see him out there. And he was a 3-year player, 3-year starter at UMass, and the guy who was a 3-year captain. I don't think he's going to be an issue. The other side, we'll see, because I don't think Will Johnson's going to play. So I think it'll be precautionary. And do you dress some of those guys just in case? I think I would if they're capable. I don't think they're going to need to. I think that they're going to roll ECU. This is not the ECU team that would put a scare into you maybe 4 or 5 years ago or whatever. 6 years ago, who knows? But so when we say giant killer, yeah, they've got that history, but let's be honest, this is probably not a good football team. They've got a lot more questions than answers. So, but we don't know exactly what they do have. So maybe there will be some surprises there. As AB, I think, mentioned in chat, they haven't been tackling in practice. So are they going to be sure tacklers? That's going to be a key in this game. If they try to throw underneath, you got to get them on the ground. So, but I just don't think they have the firepower on either side of the ball to hang with Michigan. I really think the game, especially in the trenches up front on defense, it's going to be really hard for them to move the ball.
I agree. In Mason Garcia, he's looks like some physical tools, but this was when he was a true freshman. But he has one start in his career against Navy in 2020. He goes 10 for 23, 104 yards. He did rush for 87 yards and a touchdown, but they lose that game disappointingly to Navy. He's 50% career completion. Now, things will change with him potentially as the starter, but I just don't see enough there. And then they lose 2,000-yard receivers from last season. I was talking to an East Carolina writer just about an hour ago, and he was saying that they felt like they were pretty deep last year. They just didn't need to use some of these guys. So, they may not have the stats, they may not have the snaps, but they're capable. So we will see how much that actually comes to fruition on Saturday. He said also a concern is the amount of transfers they brought in. You can't ease them in like Michigan can against ECU. For ECU, you're trying to play the number 2 team in the country, and obviously that's a little more challenging for guys that are just joining the system. But let's move over to the other side of the football with Michigan's offense, which will be coordinated by Kirk Campbell, quarterback's coach. He's going to call the plays on Saturday. Jesse Minter as he said he'll be watching the offense and kind of, up front there instead of, being with the defense during the, when the offense is on the field. So that'll be a little change up, but it is going to be Kirk Campbell calling the plays. The number one storyline, as we talked about on Monday, is Blake Corum's return. But when I look at this ECU defense and the secondary, which has some transfers coming in, 2 new corners, and that's, coming in from a team last year that ranked 130th in the country against the pass, 102nd in third down defense. They allowed 197 plays of 10-plus yards, 71 plays of 20-plus yards, both of those ranking worse than 100th in the country. And then the key stat that I was able to pluck is they rank 100. Last year they ranked 107th in the country, allowing 15.2 yards per attempt on passes of 20-plus air yards. So those deep balls, very susceptible back there. And as AB, reading your story from earlier in the week, Kalel Mullings talking about Kirk Campbell, he said, yeah, I've seen a lot of shots in practice. I think we're going to see some of those shots early on from J.J. McCarthy. And if they connect, would be a pretty good sign at the beginning of the season. You got to consider the competition, but just the fact that maybe they could connect on some of those.
Yeah, and part of it too is with there being some questions about what's going to be available to Michigan on defense Saturday. I mean, that puts the onus on the offense to just go out and take care of your business. They're healthy up front, a little bit banged up at wide receiver, but we think they'll have their stars there: Cornelius Johnson, Roman Wilson, Colston Loveland. Then obviously those 2 backs as well. So, when you look at this ECU defense, they are a 4-2-5. So similar to probably what they'll see later in the year, with the likes of a team like Ohio State and a couple others on Michigan's schedule. So, every time people ask what's the benefit of playing cupcakes in the non-conference, and, again, beating up on a team is one thing, but it's about the looks you get to, the preparation you get, and kind of some of those defensive and offensive installs that you can just kind of build on later in the year. So, there is still value in that, from an offensive standpoint. Yeah. I mean, you look at this ECU pass defense, they are susceptible to those big plays. They were last year. I think they're less talented now than they were last year. So, this is probably a game where Roman Wilson probably has some running room across, or down the field, I should say. I just think they can probably get whatever they want in terms of that passing game. And then if they want to if the defense wants to devote a little more time to slowing down those Michigan pass catchers, well, guess what? You have the 2 best backs in college football. So again, this is where I have very few concerns about what the offense looks like. But again, just maybe the only question is operationally what it looks like, given that obviously no Sharon Moore, no Jim Harbaugh. Those are 2 big losses. And, even if you believe in your culture and you believe in your leadership, operationally, that's still just a big load on everyone else. So we'll see how Kirk Campbell does. I expect them to be aggressive, to take their shots. Maybe the playbook is still sort of vanilla, but I don't think it needs to be anything more than that.
Yeah, one thing I hope they don't do is get too cute right away, right? Everybody's going to want to put their own stamp on things, and I love Kirk Campbell. I love Sharon Moore, who's not going to be there, but I love what Kirk Campbell did in the offseason about talking to his guys about what are your strengths and what do you like to, best. So I don't think you need to come out and throw 5-6 times in a row. I think you're going to do what you do best, and that's run the ball. At the same time, I think you're going to see more guys put in positions to succeed in terms of matchups. Colston Loveland, I think they'll move him around and see if they can get some targets for him. I think Donovan Edwards in the passing game, maybe even Blake Corum in the passing game. Keep an eye on what they do with those two guys together, because we've heard some things. We've heard things. So pretty exciting there. And J.J. McCarthy, we'll see if he comes out on fire, if he comes out confident. I think he will. I think he's a guy that, in my opinion, he's one of those guys that's going to continue to get better as he's here and more confident. And you're going to start to see more and more of them trusting in him to do that. He looks like, as Jim Harbaugh said, more of a man now. He's gotten rid of the baby face. And you know what? He's healthier than he was a year ago at this time. So it's going to be fun, fellas. We're going to have to really wait a month to see, what this team is against decent competition probably. But like AB said, you can always tell some things in some games. And I think you're going to see a bunch of guys that are out there excited to play a game.
Yeah, how on fire JJ comes out is going to be interesting, because he was absolutely on fire to begin last season with a couple near flawless performances, as Jim Harbaugh described them. So coming out of camp, and it feels like everything anyone says about JJ, just how impressive he's been in preseason practices. So excited to see that. Last thing on ECU's defense is the strength, probably with a couple edge rushers that are preseason All-American picks in Chad Stevens and Jeremy Lewis. A little bit easier now to be a preseason All-American pick when you have, some of those teams that left, like Cincinnati and Houston. But it seems like those two, they're pretty high on them. Real quick, I want to talk about special teams, because we haven't done so a ton. But Jim Harbaugh saying that he thinks James Turner is extremely accurate. That's what they've seen from him in practice. And then Tommy Doman saying he has a pro leg. I actually think Tommy Doman is going to be an upgrade over what we saw in the second half of last season with Brad Robbins. And that's crazy to say in a way, because Michigan had 2 specialists drafted, only the second school to have that in the same draft over the last 40 years. But I think Michigan's going to upgrade at punter. And then returner is going to be really interesting to watch. Will they go with Kalel Mullings, who will be back there for punts? So it's going to be interesting. I don't know that they're going to have to use Tommy Doman a lot, but he's one of those guys on punts that I'm excited to see.
I think Mullings kickoff, right? Not punt.
Yeah, I think Mullings for kickoffs.
Yeah, I think you said punt, and I think Jake Thaw is a guy that they like there. He catches the ball. He's been catching the ball better. We'll see if more than one guy gets an opportunity back there. What we heard about Alex Orji, we'll see if he gets an opportunity. I think a lot of guys will. Maybe not, though, because I don't imagine that ECU is going to be kicking off too much, fellas, on Saturday. So just my gut feeling. But you know what? And it's no slam on Brad Robbins. I think he'd be the first one to admit that he was not kicking to his ability last year. This guy has a huge leg, and congratulations to him making the Cincinnati Bengals, being their punter. Love that, because he's a great kid from a great family. So, but Tommy Doman, he said, Jim Harbaugh said he had the biggest leg and some of the biggest kicks since of any punter since he's been here. There have been some good ones. So, we'll see if they opt to go between 45, 50 yards, if they opt to kick field goals, or if they go for it more often. Or I don't think you're going to see them punt, but I think it wouldn't surprise me if they trust that defense a little bit more and go for some more of those. So, but anxious to see what Turner can bring, because I think he was 14 of 22 a couple of years ago. Last year, I think he was 21 of 23 or something like that. So hopefully that consistency is there. Sounds like it has been, at least from 40, 45 yards in.
I don't have much to add special teams wise. I mean, we cover a Big Ten school, so I'm always going to be interested in seeing what the punter looks like and if you punt from your opponent's side of the field. So excited to see it, though. I feel like we've been talking about Tommy Doman for a few years. Very easily could have been this team's starting punter last year. Brad Robbins comes back for a 6th year and it kind of pushes him down a bit. But really excited to see about what he brings to the table, because from what we've heard, I mean, he might, it's weird to say, maybe the most quote unquote leg talent of any guy of the Harbaugh era, based on those in the know, what they've had to say about it. So Interested in seeing, because flipping the field and field position, that's a big part of this game too.
Over under on amount of snaps for Tommy Doman on Saturday. I think he may be disappointed with his lack of playing time.
3.
Okay.
Is that too
The
high?
over under at 2.5.
Okay.
Take the under.
You never know when you get deep into a game, when you get the third
For
and
sure.
fourth stringers out there, which had better be the case, guys. ECU is more of a name team than some of these others that they brought in the past, but they just aren't. They don't appear to be a very good football team this year.